Breaking news! There was some news recently that had everyone on the edge of their seats, and I'll give you all the details. Before we dive into the latest news, be sure to hit that like button to stay up to date with all things Browns. Trust me, you won't want to miss any of this as the season heats up. Now, let's talk about Nick Chubb. We all know how crucial he is to our offense, and everyone has been anxiously awaiting his return after that devastating knee injury last season. The big question on everyone's mind has been, when can we expect to see him back on the field? Well, here's the latest update. Sports medicine physician Jesse Morse issued a word of caution to all of us who were hoping to see Chubb back in Week 5. Dr. Morse took to social media to explain that while Chubb may be physically ready in Week 5, it may be smarter for the Browns to take it slow. He suggested that Chubb's return could happen anywhere from Week 5 to Week 11, depending on how his recovery progresses. Now, I know that may seem like a long wait, but let's be real, rushing him back could be a huge mistake. We don't want to see Chubb back on the field unless he's 100% ready. After all, the last thing we need is to risk another injury because we pushed him too early. And the good news is that the Browns have a solid position at running back. Jerome Ford has shown some promise, and we have D'Onta Foreman, who should be back soon after that rib injury late in the preseason. So what does all this mean? It means we might need to be a little more patient, but that's okay. When Chubb returns, we want him to be at full strength, ready to dominate like we know he can. We've seen how hard he's worked to get back, and we're not far off from seeing him back on the field again. But let's temper our expectations and focus on the long term, getting Chubb back to his best. How do you feel about possibly waiting a little longer for Chubb to return? Let me know what you think. So, as the Browns whittle down their final 53-man roster, there's been a lot of buzz surrounding rookie defensive tackle Mike Hall Jr. You've probably heard the rumors. Hall's situation is pretty complicated right now. The initial police reports of the incident that led to his arrest were definitely alarming, but interestingly, Hall was back on the practice field the next day. That raised a lot of eyebrows, and for good reason. Since then, things have gotten even murkier. We're hearing that Hall's fiancée has reportedly backtracked on some of the more serious allegations she initially made. But even so, the situation is far from resolved, and it's definitely casting a shadow over Hall's future with the Browns. On Monday, the Browns began making their roster cuts, with 16 players already out. But according to reports, there's another spot that could open up because Hall is expected to be placed on the commissioner's exempt list. This is a big deal, as it means Hall will not be on the roster while the league's investigation is ongoing. Now, the exempt list is a bit of a wild card in situations like this. It's been used somewhat haphazardly in the past. Last week, we saw players like Zay Jones and Chris Claybrooks face suspensions for personal conduct policy violations, but only Claybrooks ended up on the exempt list. Jones, who had a similar situation to Hall with a domestic violence arrest, managed to finish the 2023 season without being placed on the list, though his charges were dropped months later. It seems like the league's decisions about who makes it onto this list and who doesn't can be pretty unpredictable. Even big names like Von Miller were considered for the list at one point, but never made it. As we get closer to Tuesday, we'll be keeping an eye on how this all plays out. What happens with Hall could have a significant impact on the Browns roster as we approach the start of the season. Now, Browns fans, I want to hear from you. How do you feel about Hall's situation? Do you think he'll end up making the final roster? Let us know in the comments below. Let's talk about our running back situation. Nick Chubb will be out for at least the first 4 weeks of the season as he recovers from that brutal knee injury he suffered last year. We know Chubb is the heart of our offense, so his absence leaves a big hole to fill. Now, we have Jerome Ford stepping up as the starter. Ford had a solid year last season, rushing for over 800 yards after Chubb went down. But here's the thing, our running back depth is looking pretty thin right now. D'Onta Foreman and Nyheim Hines are both out with injuries, leaving Ford as the only healthy running back with the regular season approaching. So, the big question is, should the Browns bring in another running back to help ease the load? One name that keeps coming up is Kareem Hunt. Hunt is a familiar face to us, having spent the last 5 seasons in Cleveland. He knows the system inside out and has proven to be a reliable scoring option, throwing for 9 touchdowns last season, a career high for him. The good news is that Hunt is currently a free agent, so bringing him back could be a smart move. We could sign him on a cheap deal or even wait until after roster cuts and add him to the practice squad. He would be ready to step in if we needed him, and having someone with his experience could be crucial, especially if Ford needs some relief. Sure, Foreman and Hines could be back soon, but we all know how unpredictable injuries can be. Last season was a perfect example of how quickly things can go south, and we don't want to be caught off guard again. What do you think, Browns fans? Should we bring Kareem Hunt back to Cleveland to help carry the load, or do you think we should stick with the running backs we have? Now, let's talk about what's going down with our rookie defensive lineman, Michael Hall Jr. According to reports from Mary Kay Cabot of Cleveland.com, Hall is expected to be placed on the NFL Commissioner's exempt list tomorrow. This move comes after Hall was arrested earlier this month on domestic violence charges following a dispute with his fiancée. Even though Hall was arrested, he was back on the practice field pretty quickly and even played in our last 2 preseason games. But with this new development, it looks like Hall won't be able to participate in any football activities for the Browns as he'll be placed on that exempt list. What does that mean for the team? Well, he won't count towards the 53-man roster, which is something the Browns will have to finalize by Tuesday. The NFL is set to conduct its investigation to determine whether Hall should face a suspension. As of now, Hall hasn't been convicted, and his next court date is set for September 10th, just after our Week 1 matchup against the Dallas Cowboys. Hall was one of our promising picks from the 2024 draft, selected in the 2nd round out of Ohio State. He'd been showing a lot of potential during training camp and preseason, making this news all the more disappointing. For now, we're in a bit of a wait-and-see mode. The Browns haven't officially announced the move yet, but with roster cuts looming, we're bound to get more clarity in the next couple of days. Hall's situation adds another layer of complexity as we prepare to kick off the season, and it's going to be interesting to see how the team handles this. So, what do you think, Browns fans? How should the Browns handle the Hall situation? Should they prepare for the possibility of moving on from him, or do you think there's a chance he could return? What urgent changes do you think the Browns should make? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Despite all the obstacles that come our way, we must keep the faith and trust that our team will overcome everything and win the title we've always dreamed of. I believe in you, and so do you. And before you go, like this video and subscribe to stay up to date with all things Cleveland Browns. Let's go Browns!